All right. Welcome everyone to this book tour and discussion with Dirk Holemans. Both everybody here in Helsinki and also those participating online across Europe, maybe even the world. This event is organized by the Green European Foundation with the support of the Finnish Green think tank Visio and with the financial support of the European Parliament. My name is Lukas Korpelainen. I'm the coordinator for the think tank Visio. I'll just say a few practicalities here before we get on with the program. So shortly I will have a small interview with Dirk and Leena Brandt, who's a journalist, and also then we'll have a discussion, and we'll be joined by Tuuli Hirvilammi and Paavo Järvensivu. Then we'll have some time for questions and discussion, and we'll end with a small reading by Dirk. Also, if you haven't in advance, please sign your name there at the registration form. It's there by the table. This is also very important. We also have some free copies of the book. First come, first served, so please help yourselves. Ja nopeasti suomeksi tervetuloa tähän tilaisuuteen, jonka on järjestänyt Green European Foundation. Keskustelu käydään englanniksi. Tässä on myös kysymysten aikaa lopussa. Jos haluatte, voitte myös kysyä suomeksi kysymyksiä, mä voin sitten tulkata siinä niin. Ja jos et ole etukäteen, niin olkaa hyvä ja käykää myöskin ilmoittautumassa tuohon lomakkeeseen, niin tämä on tärkeää järjestäjille. So without further ado, please, thank you for everybody coming here.
Thank you, Lukas. So my name is Leena Brandt, and I'm discussing first with Dirk Holemans, who has written together with Lara Ferranten and Elze Vermaasin a book about beyond growth. Well, you come from the think tank Oikos in Belgium, Flandern. What made you, and your colleagues, what made you write this book?
Well, our core mission is to contribute to the search for another economy, another model of economy that allows for everybody to strive to flourish within the planetary boundaries. So for many years, we have been working together with authors like Tim Jackson, who wrote the book Prosperity Without Growth, but also with Jason Hickel, who wrote the book Less is More. And then 2 years ago, there was a huge conference at the European Parliament, Beyond Growth, which was really fantastic. There were 3,000 people there. And then we thought it's time to have a decent book in Dutch about this new vision for another economy. And as it was quite successful, the Green European Foundation decided to translate it into English. So in a nutshell, that's how it was born.
You have been working with this idea of degrowth and beyond growth for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. What is the sort of a new thing in it, you think?
I think that what we really try to do is to combine social and ecological goals, policy goals, because I think a main problem in our societal debates and also politics is that on the one hand you have social policies, and on the other hand, you have climate policies, biodiversity policies, and then sometimes they can be presented as being opposing each other. And they say ecological policies are too expensive, and so from the vision of the concept of provisioning systems, we have to provision for everyone what is necessary to have a decent life. You can combine these two goals, because the word enough, economy of enough, means everybody should enough. So that's really part of a social policy. But there are people that have too much, overconsumption. And so you have to tackle these two at the same time if you want to redesign the different systems of our society, mobility system, energy system, housing.
So you think that in the beginning or earlier, the discussion and research on degrowth was too sort of a primitive, taking only this economy?
I don't think primitive. I think there has been gone along a lot of attention providing scientific materials that GDP growth is a bad indicator. There have also been developed quite some good proposals, but I think we bring it closer to the really actual societal debate. So I sometimes say we should be able to communicate all climate policy proposals as social policy proposals. Kind of climate policy in disguise. That would really be, I think, a strong position.
So our other guests are already nodding, and I'm afraid that we'll have this big agreement on things. I try to be the one that is posing the difficult questions, and I hope the audience will join me later on. So let me introduce, there is Tuuli Hirvilammi, researcher at the University of Tampere, and she's been specializing in sustainable well-being and eco-social policy, and was surprised to find her ideas and text in the book. Welcome here. And Paavo Järvensivu, researcher at the BIOS Research Unit, and you have been researching the relationship between economy, environment, and culture, and also started degrowth.fi blog some 20 years ago? 15. Yes. 15 years ago. And it came to an end 10 years ago. Why?
Well, well, it was a project for us to think through these issues, and I guess we got to a point where something else was needed besides writing a degrowth blog.
Okay. Work continues in other forms. The main issue in this book is enough. What is enough? What is the idea of being enough for you and you and you? For you, it's everybody has an own idea about what is enough. How do you see this concept of enough?
I think it's a quite clear concept, because everybody understands that in a fair society everybody should have enough, and by which it's clear a lot of people don't have enough. So we don't need this kind of middle class discussion, what should be enough. Let us first take care that everybody has enough. And of course, introducing the planetary boundaries indicates that some people have too much. But and then you have to say it's enough with the overconsumption. But the crucial point of our book is we need systemic change. So it's not about this kind of discussion which, what do you do in life, what do you eat, and then after 5 minutes everybody feels guilty. We should really acknowledge that it are the societal structures that allow us to live a certain life or stand against it. So we need to restructure society so that everybody has a decent life, enough, while at the same time respecting planetary boundaries, which means, talking about mobility, we should provide an abundance of mobility, but in a sustainable way. More public transport, good cycle lanes, etc. And of course, looking at the boundaries, less private cars. That's clear. The same, and of course, also, that's very easy. Let's ban private jets, and then for flying, let's introduce a frequent flyer tax. Not a kind of frequent flyer benefit what you get today, but a frequent flyer tax. And then you have kind of mobility for everyone.
I like that idea, frequent flyer tax. I'll talk about that later. Tuuli, what do you say?
What is enough? Yes, it's a good question, but first I want to start or begin by saying congratulations. I think this is very timely and topical book and important contribution to this field. And I've noticed that in addition to sufficiency, enough is used more and more as a concept. Of course, there was a book, Enough is Enough, published by D.S. and O'Neill already 2014. So at least since that, I've been thinking about enough and sufficiency being quite similar concepts. And in Finnish language, we have also played with this idea of enough or sufficiency in the context of degrowth discussion. As Paavo mentioned, quite early on, they launched the degrowth.fi web page, and we were struggling how to translate degrowth into the Finnish language because we don't have this prefix like D something. And we then kind of concluded, or at least one quite prominent suggestion has been like a sufficiency economy in Finnish language, kohtuutalous. So it's about being enough. So it's very the core idea of degrowth for us has been that we have to drive societies towards sufficiency, I would say, because sufficiency for me refers more to the kind of space in between minimum and maximum. So it's fair, it's respect both the planetary boundaries and also the social floor, as you also referred. But enough I like because it's kind of also a slogan or like strong wording to say that now it's time. Now we have to say that now it's enough. And also from the inequality perspective, as you write very nicely in the book about the carbon inequalities, very extreme, our wealth concentration, how it's linked to our carbon emissions in the world where the top 10% of the population emit almost or more than half of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and the global bottom still has to suffer from the consequences of climate crisis. So it's very good to say that, yes, now it's enough from many perspectives.
But I must comment that after this degrowth block that ended 10 years ago, there was a new one, kohtuusliike, that started. But there has been not one single publication in 1 year. What has happened to kohtuusliike?
Yes, maybe as all non-government civil society actor-based networks, it has lacked some resources and human power. It's only based on voluntary activism, and life goes. But I hope it's still somewhere. I know they are having activities, and for example, Kolin Kohtuusvaarassa, I think they organized it last year. I just was abroad.
May I say something about the word?
Sure.
Enough, because in my language, Dutch, we have the same word. It's called genoeg. I don't know how it's in your language. The word genoeg in Finnish. In Sweden, there was a word quite similar.
In Finnish, it's tarpeeksi.
Something different. Okay.
A bit different.
Okay, but I wanted to say is that what I found fascinating is that looking to the etymology of the words, Dutch and then further, is that it was used by people eating and having enough, and with a very positive connotation. Thank you, I have enough. And in my language, we even have still a saying, it was enough for me, which means it was really a pleasure. So I think this is also very important that we have this kind of positive connotation. If we have enough, it's great, let's be together and enjoy it.
Yes, if I may continue. What? But in Finnish language also, I would say this kohtuus, it's kind of moderation, it's very positive. It's something that you have reached the middle way in between of overconsumption or excess and in between of suffering of poverty. And it's like you have enough. It's very like content, and it's based on the kind of Aristotelian virtues idea. Or yes,
Paavo, please.
Yeah, there has always been something troubling for me personally in this sufficiency, this kind of strong moderation aspect. I think that people need, you might even call it a need, they need like these excess things, like going beyond stuff. It's something we need, but unfortunately in this kind of consumer culture it's directed so that it's in very basic things like driving a car, we go towards excess, whereas that could be just basic, very moderate, very sufficiency-oriented, but in terms of, let's say, arts or sports or dancing or whatever, these kind of aspirations in life, I think that we need this like excesses and spending too much that we cannot afford and so forth. But that should be, or should and could be limited in our spheres of life. So perhaps in this kind of what we could call mainstream consumer culture, this thing that should be in dancing and in arts and so in sciences and so forth, that's now in like everyday eating, everyday transport to work and so forth, which is somehow perverse to me, I think.
I like what you say. I use the word abundance, but this really has to do with how we design our society, how we design our cities. And to give one example of the city where I live, in Ghent in Belgium, there has been a major shift in the city policies, something like 12, 13 years ago. With at that time, there was after election a green-red majority, and one of the things was a very strong change in mobility policy. A lot of investment in room for pedestrians, a huge car-free center, a good, very cycle network, and then a kind of concept that you cannot drive through the city anymore with your car, which at that time seemed quite radical, probably still is compared to other cities. But what happened is that more and more people choose to use their bike. And people realize, I don't need a car for this city. It makes no sense. And especially this car-free center, it's quiet. And there's some greenery, it has a certain quality. So I think what you mentioned, we need abundance of spaces where we can meet without consumption. We need an abundance with social relations. But this has to do how we shape our surrounding, our environment. And of course, we also have to get rid of advertisements then. But I think this is key for me, this view of really redesigning place. We have to return spaces into places where it's good to meet, where there's no pressure for consumption. And then these things, we can rediscover these sources of abundance. And at the same time, there are less and less cars. Maybe that was not the first goal.
Where do we find the people or the organizations or somebody who wants to make ad for consuming less? I mean, I'm thinking all the time, like you mentioned, the advertisement, that the campaigns are for consuming more and more and more. There's always a different kind of new product that we must have. So who could do the advertising the other way around?
No, I think we have to get rid of advertisements. There are certain cities, like in France, where the things you see in most cities, with the bus stop, and you have this private advertisement, they have to get rid of it. So I think we need kind of profit-free public space. And just to mention also, the city where I live, Ghent, is rather small. But what I really find fascinating is that the same is happening in Paris, which is a huge city. Also there, in less than 20 years, this city has changed from a car-dominated, polluted city with noise, very bad air quality, etc., into now, I just yesterday saw a map, all over the surface of Paris there's now good air quality. There are bike lanes, there are streets along the River Seine, which in my memory is full with cars, and now you cycle there. So we can do it also on a huge scale.
Well, I'm more than pleased to hear that there are positive examples, and Paris has been also mentioned here in Helsinki, where there's a tendency to have more bike lanes, and then there's a huge opposition towards the bike connections because, well, the winter situation, etc. In this book, there is I recommend for everybody, there is a fantastic beginning with a list of everything that has gone, so to say, wrong during the past 50 or 100 years, more or less. It's very thorough. I really like it. But then there are also 8 proposals from. Let me see. I wrote them down on a separate paper. From few and better products to connectedness to democracy, resilient democracy, and there's a big discussion also on the role of the global South and what we have done. What do you think about the countries like Finland, where our idea of colonialism is something that is done by others? How would we in northern countries understand the role of the global South and what we have done and should do?
Well, I think that all industrialized, high-income countries of the global north are built and still are living on an extractive economy. There are people in the south, in Bangladesh, working in a very bad conditions, so we can buy a T-shirt for €3. There are people picking strawberries in Spain in very harsh conditions, so we can have cheap strawberries. So I think maybe half of all the products here in the shops in the city is connected with extraction, sucking value out of these countries, exploiting them, nature and people. And so what we need to do is here we have to decrease in a planned way the flow of energy and resources to keep our society going in a good way. This can give the room for the countries in the south to develop their own economy, making good products for their own people. And of course, we still will have coffee and chocolate, my God, I hope. But we are still keeping these countries below water by trade agreements. For every euro we give to them, so-called development money, we are so proud, at least, they give us $25 back. So the first thing we have to do is all these incredible situations of national debt, we should get rid of them, because otherwise they are kind in a prison, they cannot get out.
Tuuli, how do you see this from the Finnish point of view?
Yes, I've been nodding here. I totally agree with everything you said, and I also liked that in your book you very straightforwardly address that the ecological crisis is based on colonial, or it started with colonial time. You refer to Vandana Shiva, and I think it's very good to acknowledge the legacy of colonialism. But we in Finland, we think that okay, we were not colonial countries, so maybe it's not our fault. But indeed, as you said, it's also all high consuming or over consuming rich industrialized countries. And I just today came across with a new publication evaluating the performance of Nordic countries in relation to sustainability, and there again it was somehow stated that instead, despite our wish to be kind of pioneering countries, we want to be the green country, and we often think that we have a very strong legacy in sustainable development policies, etc. But our ecological footprints and material footprints and all the indicators of donut indicators were actually beyond the average EU 24 average. So we are worse than EU average in Denmark, in Finland, in Norway, and in this kind of rich part of the world. So we are the happiest country in the world, but we are scoring very badly in our environmental indicators. And this is actually the message that I give to my students often when teaching sustainable welfare or whatever, and they are struggling with the kind of contradictions that how, because we have this strong legacy of welfare state. We built our welfare states with the hope that we will increase our living standards, and this model is the best in the world. This kind of ideas, and now we have to face the hard truth that it's not affordable. Like we can't. It's not only affordable because of the public finances, as we hear every day in our news, but it's not affordable because of resources and global carbon budget.
Yeah, I would like to go back to this provisioning systems idea, because I think that's quite key to also this question. So we can think of how transportation is in a way provided for us. And currently it's hugely over-consuming, and it runs largely on fossil fuels and so forth. So there's a pressure to own and use a car, which more often than not runs on oil or the derivatives of oil. And now the point for me would be to transition these provisioning systems. So they are built in a certain way, and now they require certain things, certain materials, certain ways of using them, and we want to transition them to another kind of system which is not dependent on fossil fuels and the overconsumption of other stuff. So that's the basic idea. And then if we are in a way serious about this, then we would, I guess, map these different systems that we need, at least transportation and housing and food and so forth, dancing, and having these kinds of events would be some kind of systems that we want. Then how do we then when we see what kind of changes we want in these or need in these systems, then we can see it as work or as investments, and something active to be done in the economy, and something which is not kind of done for us, or we cannot wait that there's the state that does all this, or there's this certain company that does all this, or the volunteers do this, but it's actually something that calls for every one of us to, not as individuals, but in organizations and in a welfare state and so forth, to rebuild these systems, and then it gets us to these kind of trade-offs and these kind of things. So the current system kind of it causes to climate emissions and so forth, as we know, and runs on other kinds of colonial structures, as you mentioned. Then also the thing that we do, the investments and the work we do, it also, there's some bad effects. So we kind of have to, let's say, electrified industries and electrified public transport. It's not air, it's material stuff that we need to build, and we need to get that stuff from somewhere. And then we get into kind of this idea that probably we want to minimize the material effort, or design it very well so that we're not pulling stuff to our country that we don't need for these provisioning systems. And it lays out kind of the basics of what are we going to do in the next few years, in the next few decades, and so forth. So this is the kind of this is the way I see the situation that we are at.
Yes, actually, BIOS in Finland is very, very prominent in proposing this kind of planning economy. I would say, like, you are. Is it called planning economy? Maybe,
not really.
Not really, but the idea is there, and in degrowth discussion as well.
5-year plans, we are familiar with that.
Yes, but maybe they want
30 years.
They don't want to go for that direction. But in degrowth discussion, also in international degrowth research, as you know, there is now a big debate or discussion on that we need to have more long-term plans, and public authorities as well have to take more responsibility for long-term planning and resource use as well. But I just wanted to take over and continue, because as I said that we can't afford to the welfare state, I didn't want to somehow dismantle the importance of welfare systems as well. Like, I don't say we don't need them. Paavo, also you refer that it's not only state, but we all have to have responsibility for organizing those provisioning systems. Probably yes, we can have different organizations based on commoning and solidarity, social solidarity, economy, etc. But we also need some kind of strong public organizations, I would say, to steer the transformation, to regulate the systems, to regulate the market economy, and also to provide the necessary minimum to everyone, I would say. So therefore we talk about eco-welfare state, so we have to green the welfare state and build sustainable welfare.
Eco-welfare state and also the concept of ecological welfare is very important, because that resonates what people already know and resonates with something we feel proud of. So I agree. And in the book, we use the concept of universal basic services in a way to make it more operational, this concept of provisioning systems. And important, as you mentioned, universal basic services, it's public services and also stimulating people to organize themselves. I think we need both. I will talk about Belgium, the country I know. There's a lot to do for many decades already about the benefits, so-called benefits of public-private partnership. What we need are public-civil partnerships. How can governments work together with citizens and support these initiatives? To give one example, I think you will see in many countries, also in Belgium, we have a lot of citizens that already are, many years are fed up that the, call it, ecological transition of the energy system goes too slow. So they start on their own energy cooperatives, collecting money from people, building their own windmills, putting solar panels on schools, churches, and it's really gaining momentum. So we have now, Belgium is a very small country, we have more than 30. And for instance, I'm a cooperant and member of the biggest one, which is already providing green electricity for 70,000 households. And for me, the crucial point is then you're not anymore dependent of speculative markets. So because this energy co-op eco-power to which I belong has its own windmills, has its own solar panels on roofs, around 90% of electricity is self-produced, then depending whether sun or wind, there's 10% less or more bought on the European market, because the price of electricity is organized on a European level, which meant that in 2022, with the war in Ukraine, you not only had this kind of what some people would call a sound market response, scarcity, price goes up, you had also very cynical speculation. There are groups saying, okay, if there's scarcity, we won't sell a lot, because then prices go even higher. The same was for food. And so in Belgium, 1 year, 2022, an average household which was dependent on a private provider of electricity paid 500 euros more than I did. So this is a good example that if we take things back in our hands, it's also cheaper. And just to finish, we cannot afford anymore the welfare state. Health system is becoming too expensive. Look at the United States. It's awful there. If you get ill, they spend a higher proportion of their GDP than we in Europe. So I think in certain sectors, public services are the most efficient way of organizing things.
But at the same time, we we have these examples. We have households, we have companies, we have some cities, but we don't have a state doing this, and we don't have it a global thing doing this. So how do we get from these small examples and beginnings towards this sort of a global revolution that is really the essence in this proposal?
Can I say something in between to continue from that and also this, that actually there's this like a slogan in the international spheres that democratize energy or something like that. That's a very interesting question in Finland, that what does it mean, because most of the electricity or energy companies are actually municipality owned, and then there's the state owned grid operator and so forth, which plans and invests as a monopoly into these things, and the democracy aspect of we have very strong municipalities. They are very autonomous in their actions locally, but then for some reason, because of specific political ideas that we've had in Finland or have been dominant, we run these companies as kind of private companies, although they are not private companies, but they are owned by the citizens, the people. So we might as well take them and decide to run them in other ways as well. So there's a lot to do with. I think this is a hugely kind of a political, ideological question, that how do we want to run it? Do we wish to run them as the citizens please? Do we want to plan things like ecologically and what is socially good, or do we want to run them on some other principles? And this is something that hasn't attracted so much interest so far, I think. In Helsinki is a special case, not least because the company is basically run by Greens. Has been run by Greens for many years and years back. Now I think it has become a bit more agile and open towards the scientific circles, for instance, but it has been very blocked and in a way like a monolith.
So how do we get from the small-scale experiments and those things into this global, because this needs to be global to work. This is not something that can be done in a small scale and think we have succeeded. If it doesn't go across borders, it doesn't function.
I totally agree, but we also have to be honest. If I or you had the answer, we wouldn't be sitting here. So what I think is we need what I call strategic design, which means that at different levels, these initiatives, I don't think we need plans, but we need planning. This kind of forward-looking, and then strategic design for me is the things we have to do in our own organization of sector. How do they accelerate and strengthen the other actors that also want to change society? So what I see is there's a lot happening on renewables. I see there's a lot happening in regenerative farming. I see people developing alternative way of living, co-housing, but in a way they are not really forming a kind of coalition. So I think we need this kind of smart coalitions, very flexible and agile, but the most important thing is this kind of consciousness. If you really want to accelerate these things, then everything we do should be designed in such a way that we also support the other initiatives. So you have maybe local renewable energy. Okay, who can use it? At what cost? How are we going to have logistics in the city? Okay, let's organize this in a way this uses this green electricity. Then how are people commuting? Let's organize that in a way that things reinforce, and so building momentum, like a flying wheel.
But what you are talking about is this sort of an ideal society where the planning is done sort of a science-based, based on facts, etc. And that is not happening.
No, but
I mean, like we had this news in Finland. Was it yesterday that they're going to end our climate panel? It's going to be something else and so forth. We have Trump in the States saying that science is just all bad. I mean, we have this sort of a political atmosphere also in many other European countries that sort of a science and research is worth less than it was earlier. Do you agree?
Totally.
Yeah, but sorry.
How do we fight against that?
No, I don't know. I don't know how to fight against that and against disinformation and everything. I think it's a huge challenge. But I just wanted to build on what you said, that you mentioned the alternatives. I would say I follow closely the alternatives kind of movements in research, but also like some movements and during the last 20 years, 15 years, there have been different initiatives introduced, like different concepts that have been used, like donut economy, well-being economy, social solidarity economy, commons I mentioned already, diverse economies. So there are many, and long time ago in Finland also with Paavo, we were involved in the initiative to bring all these actors together. So there have been these kind of movements to build the momentum and to converge towards something that is commonly shared. And I think now, recently, more and more people admit that, yes, it can be confusing when we have all these different concepts, but all are working towards the same direction. So well-being within planetary boundaries now and in the future, and we have to fix the system. So it's like transforming the systems, not just incremental changes, and also that it should be somehow inclusive, the transformation, so fairness involved. So there are very strong common denominators in all these movements, and I think the kind of umbrella term could be post-growth. Degrowth is part of this, but post-growth kind of covers all these, and it has been recently used as a kind of umbrella term for this all. And I'm involved in an EU-funded research project now. We are where we work with the kind of umbrella term sustainable and inclusive well-being as a kind of overarching goal, and we try to bring different actors together, and they all agree that yes, this is the goal, and also EU policymakers are now more and more saying that yes, beyond growth is relevant, beyond GDP is relevant. We just had a call with some EU policymakers today saying that beyond GDP is still on the agenda somewhere, even though it's not at all mentioned in the current working program of the new Commission. But still, with this sustainable and inclusive concept, they have some room, some space, and the development of alternative beyond GDP indicators, at least, is going on. And now, for example, at the UN level, the Pacts for Future, they introduced, one of the articles was to establish a high-level expert group on beyond GDP indicators, so that will be established in coming months, and hopefully it will give us some kind of resolution that will then complement the Agenda 2030 process, because that will also finish. So there are these kind of strong currents. I try to keep optimistic, saying and thinking that there are strong currents somewhere going towards that direction, despite the fact that we have awful leaders and democracy is not working because of the oligarchs and the extreme wealth inequalities as well.
Yeah, Anna, disagree. I'm continuing from that. I think that like if we try to put it in a really short way, the idea for Europe onwards could be that that let's give up or let's phase out in a planned, rapid way fossil fuels, since we are in any case importing them. So that's a very good idea for Europe. Let's also at the same time be competitive in doing that. I think that there's no way we can do it in the next 30 years if it's in some sense competitive how we do this shift away from fossil fuels. So that's and then I think that this enoughness it's not something that's totally, it's not against this idea. It's and these post-growth thinkers, researchers and others are not it's not against this idea. I would think that there needs to be much more like stronger work that's in a very close relationship to this, like actual or the everyday political debates and the kind of political world that is actually dominant and who holds power in these structures and so forth. So that's the kind of area that I'm most interested in, and I think that these are not separate. They can totally be in the same game, so to speak.
May I expand on that? I think that we really have to also be much more, I would say, brutal in the public debates. I think the perspective of Beyond Growth is the one that will give us security in the future. People feel insecure, and then we let slip the debate just into military stuff. We really have to say, do you want a secure future for your children? Then we need another economy. Do you want to secure Europe? Nowadays, every year, the European Union spends 400 billion euros just importing fossil fuels, which, apart from Norway, doesn't really come from very nice countries. So we are subsidizing Trump. Imagine how crazy we are. So the faster we have this transition to a society based on renewables, we will have hundreds of billions every year to invest in our economy, because it stays here then. And so the same goes for minerals, metals. We are in a very insecure geopolitical situation. Most crucial minerals either come from China or Africa. And so we have to accelerate the transition to a really circular economy so that all the material we have, like this building, is a kind of collection of materials we will reuse from the vision of urban mining. Not new mines, but urban mining. And the faster we implement these ideas on an important scale, the stronger and safer Europe will become. And I think this we have to tell in the public debate. We are the guys and the women and all the people who will provide security. And the others, they make everybody scared, lonely, and unhappy.
Yes, that's a very good point, and that's what we have tried to say when talking about sustainable well-being. That indeed, that's it's kind of obviously is the wish of majority of the world, because it's the only way we can have a future as human beings in this planet in the long run. But I just wanted to a little bit, like maybe I don't know, disagree, but. Elaborate on what you said about raw materials and mining and minerals and mining and circular economy, because there I think we risk to say that green growth, to go to the green growth discourse, saying that okay, it just electrifies the economy and we need to switch to renewables, but we have to combine that with eco-social perspective to ensure that the transition is fair, but also keep on the agenda this goal to reduce the material and energy throughput, because it's totally impossible to have the renewable the energy and we would have mines in Finland everywhere if we need all that minerals. So therefore, this idea of sufficiency is super important, and it's not about sufficiency of dancing or loving or something, but sufficiency of our material throughput. And circular economy is one promise towards that direction, but it also requires a lot of energy, and it can cause different kind of pollution.
It depends.
So therefore,
it depends how fast your circle is going.
But scale down is necessary, I would say.
But we have lots and lots of knowledge and facts, for instance, in this book. We have the latest figures from last year that was a catastrophe for climate and also biodiversity. And even so, people are not so worried about climate as they used to be, or environment. There is war in Ukraine, security question, there is aging population in Finland and also elsewhere in Europe, and there is this kind of issues. So Ukraine war, for instance, is really something that we Finns think a lot and support the Ukrainian people, etc. So how do we get the discussion from these issues back to the big catastrophe that is waiting us concerning climate and environment? I don't see politicians saying that we should have less, we should feel that enough was actually what we had 20 years ago or 30 years ago, etc. We don't see politicians doing that.
What we say in the book is that some things, and I'm glad you're mentioning dancing, some things we need much more, and some much less. So I will never say we need less, no. We need other things much more, and so it's interesting, the book was first published in Dutch, and there we invented a new word, because we'll never use the concept of degrowth, because then the first 10 minutes you have to explain what it's not. Then I've been a politician, then you never win a public debate. And so you have the word growth, which is in Dutch groei, and we invented the word omgroei. It's very funny, it doesn't exist, but everybody understands it. And 2 days ago, in Stockholm, it appeared that they could invent the same word in Swedish, so I'm quite curious whether it would be possible in Finnish. So it's growing in other direction, away from bad things, but investing and growing all the good things we need as human beings to flourish. And the other thing I want to say is that I think not everybody, but a lot of people of the green movement have considered themselves, and then also all the other people, as being very rational beings. You give a summary of the latest IPCC report, you put a graph, and then you think people are convinced. No, we are totally irrational people. Even
we have noticed.
But there are scientists getting the Nobel Prize now because they're showing it. So we are moved by emotion, passion, and so this is what we also, in our narrative, in the way we have proposals, we have to resonate with what people really care about, and also take care that our language reflects this. And I think there is really a task to be very self-critical. And you may laugh with Trump, but his language resonates with deep feelings of a lot of Americans. And you can find explanations for it. To give one small example, inequality in the United States now, it's bigger than 1 century ago. So a guy saying, make America big again, it resonates, while people of the Democratic Party saying you're deplorables and I have this suit of 20,000 euros. So we have to, in a way, how can we resonate again with the basic passions and drivers of people? I think there's a solution.
I won't talk about passion in some sense, but I think that these feelings of deep insecurity are also as important, and Ukraine, as you mentioned, or Russia is very important for us. And I've been thinking a lot about industrial policy or transformative industrial policy, and that's a kind of a place where these things come together. For instance, probably a lot of Finnish people want some kind of steel production to remain in Finland, if not for any other reason than for security reasons. And then the question could be that in which conditions this will happen, that we will still produce steel in Finland. It needs to be competitive, and it seems highly likely that we need to figure out fast how to do it without fossil fuels. And that doesn't need to be in line with the idea of growth, but it's just admitting that there's a certain level of steel that we want to produce in the coming years. Probably if we get the provisioning systems right, we don't have to do a new car or 100,000 new cars every year, but a few public car vehicles and so forth. So we don't need it that much, but we need to invest in the steel making transformation so that we can get our ammunition and the nice public transportations and wherever we need the steel for. So these I think that asking these kind of questions actually brings this to the kind of core of what we are in some sense passionate about, security in this case, but also the deepest political discussions and decision-making levels that we have.
Yes, while Paavo has been thinking about industrial policies, I've been thinking about social security systems more, or like social policies and welfare institutions, and I think that also provides one answer why this is not on the political agenda. People have very mundane worries and concerns. They have to care about the salaries and rents and mortgage and schooling and everything, like very at the household level. So it's no wonder if something that somehow is somewhere in the perspective more far from these mundane and everyday concerns, they don't kind of fit into the agenda, especially if they are not very strongly present in the public discourse or social media discourse or elsewhere. But then also talking about the public policy making or local politics. Paavo mentioned that we have strong municipalities, but for example, being active in municipalities have again kind of gave me to understand that the lock-in our part dependency in welfare state with our public financing being entitled with or somehow coming from these sources of global economy, it's very difficult to transform the system in that current setting. So therefore politicians, they don't only are maybe afraid of the alternative narrative for providing less, but they don't also know how to fix the system, where at the same time they have to have resources to provide what is decent, but also what is kind of necessary in the current system, where we have legislation that certain provisioning systems need to be provided, like social and health services. So where the resources come. So this kind of, we have to fix the funding issue, financing welfare states in the kind of post-growth context. And I always say that I've been seeking the answer to the question how to finance welfare states without economic growth last 20 years, and I have to admit that I still don't know the answer, but I've seen some kind of progress. Many researchers are at least addressing this issue, and I think the moreover or more importantly, we have to just understand that monetary system needs to be fixed as well, and in our relation to money. What is money, and what are the financial resources, and where they come from, etc., how they can be spent, and yes. So, and there maybe I look at the Paavo who have also introduced these ideas, but I don't know if you want to go to that direction, how to fix finances.
Just very shortly, I was actually quite pleased with Mario Draghi's competitiveness report, and if someone in Europe knows that it's not about the lack of money, I think he would totally agree with Keynes that everything we can do, we afford to do. So it's not about that. As a central banker, Draghi knows that he can say that in his the central banker position that everything is possible. Like don't worry.
So there is no scarcity of money in this field, and it's just about where do we invest and why we invest to certain things.
Indeed, if we can do it in Europe, in the Eurozone, then we can do it.
And I would say it's a kind of joke, but if we would have a kind of global wealth tax and just all these people that were in the White House recently, there would be abundance of money. All these people have become rich because they have the new digital extraction machine. Think about, let's take one corporation, Apple. So it's a very interesting case. So Apple came to Europe and they made their headquarters in Ireland. Why? Ireland has almost no corporation tax. And then the European Commission said, that's unfair. You should, as an Irish government, tax Apple. And the government said, no, we won't. And then European Court has decided and said to the Irish government, you have to demand that Apple pay taxes. And so now they have to pay something like, I think it's more than 1 billion euros. Suddenly the Irish government has to spend, I hope they spend it on good things. So we need another fiscal system. So I agree on the high level, a new monetary system, but in short term, we need another fiscal system. And so OECD has been working on that for many years, that corporations first pay a basic level of 15%, but in every country where they do business, and not like they try to do in Europe. We do it in Ireland, and then through all this fiscal optimization, they call it, between different activities in the member state, they don't pay almost €1. So, and that's also something very important, because I think a lot of people are, I would say, fed up with the system because they see huge inequalities. I have to pay my taxes as a small household, and then you see these other persons getting richer and richer and not paying. So the sense of fairness, introducing again the sense of fairness, everybody has to contribute, and the bigger shoulders you have, the more you have to contribute. I think this also will increase the support for the transition.
Before we continue, I have questions to continue with, but I would like to ask if there are questions in the audience. There is a microphone. Lucas has the microphone. So please, anybody?
I have at least two questions. I have more questions, but at least two. First is, what was the reaction of the shopkeepers in Ghent when they moved to cycling and walking streets?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Research has shown that if people commute by bike, they will buy more from local shops, which they meet on their way home. So it's better for the local shops. So it's a positive reaction.
Okay, then another, I think, which is a very key question, which actually I asked already many years ago from Paavo. What would happen if we really would globally distribute material and income over everybody in the south and north? What would happen to the level in the north. I mean, I think it's very difficult to somehow tell somebody to do degrowth or change growth, like you formulated it, if people feel they have to offer something, they have to give away something.
Yeah, I like the provisioning systems idea also for this reason, that I think that like public transportation is a par excellence good example that actually, if it really works and the biking and walking besides public transportation really works, then it's not about giving up on your car, but you don't actually need it. Why would you want it in that case? It's actually a ridiculous investment and a ridiculous time-consuming and space-consuming device and so forth. So if I understood right, this is one of the easiest, let's say, examples where investing in the system actually makes you happy to give away something. Or did you have some other point?
No. Well, it's a very good point. For example, this public transportation. I mean, we are living in the capital area here, where transportation is fairly good. But nevertheless, every day when I move from Espoo, where I live, to the center, it takes me more than 1 hour. I have to wait in wintertime 20 minutes to change buses because we have this, this main roads. So
yeah.
You have to give something up.
Well, if we would be serious about these provisioning systems, there would be a lot more pressure to make it work better for you, I'd say.
But if I continue from here, because this question of giving up and how it will be here in Nordic countries, for example, if we really redistribute the resources equally, and I think no one has the answer. Like we have not established like this is the lifestyle we should have. Therefore I like the sufficiency space idea, because it kind of gives the idea that there is a maximum and then there is a minimum, and then in between there will be the provisioning systems that ensure that we keep within these limits. And if we think about the global carbon budget, if it gives us the maximum, it has been suggested that we should reduce our carbon footprints to 1.5 tons per capita by 2030, if I remember correctly. So, for example, this gives estimates that it's very drastic change. If you think like individually, like it's at the household level, if now a household has 10 tons per year per capita, and it has to be reduced down to 1.5. If you think about that at a household level, it's like dramatic. You can't imagine what kind of change it requires. But if the municipality, for example, changes the energy source, it already affects the carbon footprint of every household in that area. So therefore, again, the change of the provisioning systems or need satisfiers is very crucial.
And also our language and what we put in the cultural debate, we have to think about solidarity, being one community, feeling connected. Then you don't give something away, you receive something. And also, I think we can also see some very interesting changes which people are leading richer lives. To give one example, I have 2 daughters, 26, 27. They are both vegetarian. They can cook these Asian meals I'm incapable of, and they're so tasty. And so they don't have the feeling that they have lost something. Now they have discovered a whole interesting world of tastes and smells, and I'm also discovering it. So it's also this kind of what do we put on the table, literally, as cultural aspirations. Where do we talk about it, and joy. I think it's also very important to have these kind of new ways of joy in these more sustainable lifestyles. I'm very happy with this fantastic food. I'm very happy if I can cycle to my work because it's a kind of ease, not being stuck in traffic jams and so on. I think it's very important that also this narrative of it's a better life, we have more time for each other, we have more social relations, we have food, and I'm happy if I know the farmer from which the food comes. It gives me connection. This, I think, is our story of change.
Yes, certainly, and I fully believe that when we try to endorse sustainable well-being, it's more fulfilling, flourishing life to all, and as you also mentioned and addressed nicely in the book, that there are other reasons than ecological crisis to go beyond growth, and one is exactly the very burdensome lifestyle we are having at the moment, with a lot of mental health problems, burnouts, etc. So we are also getting tired with this system, and the new alternative economy could help in this regard as well.
There is a further question. Yes.
And also, if our viewers on YouTube have questions, you can leave them in the chat and I can read them.
Yeah, I would like to ask that there has been talk about now about tariffs worldwide. About their could actually tariffs, which traditionally have been seen by economists quite bad, that they hinder growth and such, but could they actually be used towards getting to the enough state, or how do you see tariffs? Could they be a good thing?
Well, I think that European Union has decided to have a very positive tariff, which is called the cross-border tax, because Europe has acknowledged that, for instance, if we produce green steel, it will be more expensive. So if you just keep the global market, nobody will buy it and our companies will close. So the cross-border tax means that for all products that are imported into Europe, if they're not produced in a decent social and ecological way, we will have an import tariff. And I think it's very good. And also, I think we really have to see, does it make sense that, like Mercosur, the trade agreement, that the Germans export more cars to Brazil and we import more meat? Does it make sense in any way except for some corporations? I don't think so. So I would say if we internalize the social and ecological costs and have this kind of import tariffs, I think it's very good.
I agree that tariffs can be good for stopping or getting rid of the extractivist economy or balancing the resource use in different parts of the world, but I'm not supporting tariffs to protect the European economy, for example, or the national economies in other countries just for nationalist interests, but it has to be somehow globally fair system with tariffs. But also, of course, it's important to reduce the global emissions caused by global trade. So it can also protect local economies. So difficult question, but very important point.
No comment. Okay, further questions? Yes.
Yes, I would have a few things that I would like to invite you to comment on. And first of all, thank you for the interesting discussion and points made, and also for the book. I will happily read it. I'm looking forward to that. Maybe first of all, there was this discussion on how to make change and how to make it global. And I was wondering, I've been struggling with that topic as well for a long time, like how can we create this awareness? And would it not be, and this is where I see like a lack of government initiative, to really incorporate it in the education, because I think if you educate from a young age in terms of making people more empathic, to make them more communicative, to make them understand these inequalities and so on. So if we do it early age on and to really create this awareness that there is no need for more. There is no, in terms of, for example, ownership, that it doesn't need to be like that. Could that not be a way for, to prepare at least the next generation for something else? Then something that was also said was on taxation, for example, on flights. This flights, what was it?
Frequent flyer tax.
Which I understand to a certain extent, but I would see there a risk that you make it really more an elite thing, and you see it already also with the cars, that who can afford these Teslas and so on. It's often then the people who are have the better income and so on. So how do you avoid that an Elon Musk, who is then the richest person in the world, freely travels around, while we then would all say that, okay, we can't afford it anymore, so we can just sit there so that it becomes an elite product. And also on the fossil fuels, because I understand the need to reduce, but at the same time there's this empowerment, let's say, or push to electrify. But there seems to also be this reality that there are mines used for the rare earth materials. There is slavery involved, there's exploitation. So how do we avoid it? Because I feel that the narrative is now that this is the way forward, but is it really? Do you really believe that it is? So again, and I think that also this was mentioned, it should be just about less, and I think maybe if it's less, then it's already a big step forward. But now I feel that there's such a huge promotion, and I'm a Belgian national as well, so I understand. I saw that there is this huge push there to electrify, but at the same time, I don't feel comfortable that this is really a solution. So I said a lot now, so sorry for that, but I would invite you to maybe have a few comments on that. Thank you.
Thanks. On the last point, it's a really tricky one, but just some basic points. I think we certainly must build our systems away from fossil fuels. Electrification is one of the things that needs to happen while doing it. But at the same time, it needs to be very determined to not just be geared towards any type of growth or this kind of thing, but precisely the questions that you asked, that points, it should cause us on a collective level to think that, well, basically what is enough? So what is the goal there? I think like a very topical, like today's question for me regarding this was that there's this idea in Finland that we want to produce more or build more renewable power and perhaps even more nuclear power. And to do that, we need more electricity consumption. This is the kind of like a circular idea that's ongoing. And now there was this news that like a British market, like financial player that wants to do a data center in Kajaani, central Finland, like €1 billion data center. And the reason was that they use AI for forecasting changes in stock values. €1 billion investment into that as a data center, so that's kind of a new industrial electricity usage. And well, I can say my personal opinion. I think it's quite insane, and this is precisely something that we should be prepared now in this case when we have this like green industrial policy and so forth. We should be able to say quite easily that, well, actually this is not something that we want. This is not one of the essential things that we are building towards. So if we are seriously building our systems away from using fossil fuels, then this is certainly something that we're not accepting. But this is something that we need, these kind of, I've been talking for science-driven planning, which means indicative planning. So looking at the realistic scenarios and future pathways so that we can do better decisions and so forth. So this is precisely one of the examples where we need something like that. It cannot be just like voting with money or even voting with voice. We need like reasoned analysis for saying that, well, that's certainly off limits.
Yes, and here it also points towards the limitation of unregulated markets economy, where the demand is whatever. You can make profit out of it. So the demand needs to be somehow, we have to establish the better link with the demand, market demand and needs. What is the economy for? What is the energy for? So we need also maybe deliberate forums to discuss or plan new kind of economy, institutions to decide what should be produced and what for.
I totally agree, and so we need to get rid of fossil fuels as fast as possible. That's just scientific consensus, especially for the people in the global south, because they are suffering the most. So this means we have to electrify our society and economy. But then, and there comes the essence of this perspective of enough, if we are able to reduce our demand, it's easier to electrify. If we go from, let's say, 2 million to 1 million cars, it's easier to have them electric and provide electricity for them. If we are insulating our house, I think here it's quite okay. In Belgium we have still a lot of work, but the less energy we need to produce, the easier the transition will go. The less steel we need, the easier. And so that's the essence, I think, of the perspective of sufficiency, enough. It enables us to have this transition. It becomes more realistic. And to say one thing about cars, we have now, I would say, we need electric cars, but only a few of them. Because what people that saying, 2 years ago they were saying Tesla is the future, now less people are saying it. But also electric cars produce traffic jams. Also electric cars have tires. And tires are made of rubber. There are still forests being cut in Africa to produce rubber for our tires. So there's a lot of reasons, not only climate, but also biodiversity. If we can reorganize our society by the concept of provisioning systems, and we need less resources, we have a win-win situation. And that, I think, is really a key argument, and it is also for our geopolitical security much better.
Can I have very short? Sorry.
Less is less.
There are studies showing that it's easier to be in compliance with 1.5 degree limit with low growth or no growth GDP growth. So there are also scenarios showing that it's easier. And yes, I just want to say.
It's time to say that enough is enough. I thank you, audience, for your active questions, and I thank all panelists. This has been very interesting, and there are many questions left for me to ask later on this evening, perhaps. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So,
oh yes, you wanted to read a.
Well, if you still have 5 minutes. So one thing that we didn't talk about it, but of course time is always short, is the book starts with a kind of a short story, fiction, because we think imagination is very important. So I invite you to read this. And we also end the book with a short fiction part, how a young couple could really have a good life, flourishing, within 10 years, because a lot of studies we will get net zero by 2050, And everybody agrees because all these old men around the table know 2050. But so we have to be very ambitious and vision also from our imaginary, how could we live a good life within 10 years? And I'm going to read a little part of how within 10 years a young couple would have a very good life within planetary boundaries. And they are called Noah and Victoria. It feels like ages since they both worked 5 days a week, not counting the overtime, spent heaps of money on rent, needed their own car to get to work, and possessed products that never lasted very long. In the meantime, the European Parliament has introduced a 4-day working week. But like many of their friends, Noah and Victoria have chosen to work a little bit less than that. So Noah works Monday to Wednesday, and Victoria Tuesday to Thursday. They also help out at the local parent cooperative 1 day a week. It brought them into contact with lots of new people and gives them cheap childcare for their 2 children. Friday is a special day. It's a volunteer day, especially, and of course, on a voluntary basis. Noah works at a collective farm, half-hour away by electric bike. The agroecological farm focuses on growing locally on healthy soil, a good life for its animals, and more biodiversity. This weekly visit at the farm also means that Noah sees their parents at least once a week, as part of the farm has been converted into a co-housing project for young and old. And now that a fast train connects the city with the surrounding villages, the farm is easily accessible. If true to be told, these changes were quite nerve-wracking. What would it be like to work less and therefore earn less and, who knows, be complicit in your own uncertain future? Victoria especially found this difficult. But now they both know that their lives are richer. In fact, they have more freedom and security. One crucial change came 4 years ago, when they moved into a wonderful and affordable home in the old factory, which was renovated by a housing cooperative. Now they have a secure tenancy for life at a rent that is well below market rate. Of course, Noah and Victoria, their lives aren't completely carefree. The greenhouse gas emissions of recent decades will continue to destabilize the climate. Damaged ecosystems are recovering slowly. And while there's more solidarity globally than there was 10 years ago, for many people in regions with the highest temperatures, life is very tough indeed. Nobody can predict the future. Even the slow society in which Noah and Victoria are raising their children is still trying to work out how to respond to the words of Anat Singh. The art of living on a damaged planet and how to restore it.
Kiitos.